God, that was a tangent-based call. I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, there was a lot of tangents in this one. So
Yeah.
in this session, the topic that we initially started off with was, is it a requirement or is it in most people's best interest if you have the opportunity to live remote, work remote, travel, see the world?
Mm,
Is it in that individual's best interest? I started
mm,
with responsibility, but we changed that over
yeah.
to actually get out there, do that, get out of your little bubble,
Hmm.
and expose yourself to a lot of the world and what it has to offer.
Yeah, I think we both agreed that it is if you're wired a certain way. And if you're watching this show, you probably are wired that way. You know, if you're curious, you have a sense of wonder, you know, you have yearnings to do interesting, amazing, challenging, different things, and you simply have to go traveling. There's no replacement for what it can give you. I think
Yeah,
we both
and
agreed.
the connection that we made in the end, I won't give it away now,
No,
but we actually made a connection between those
yeah,
feelings.
I think there's a pretty strong punchline in this, which you and I didn't realize until we actually discovered it ourselves on this call. But really, really, really powerful realizations from our traveling link to the work that we do today. And as you said, the viewers can discover that during the call.
Yeah, well, this was a fun one, and I hope you enjoy it.
Sounds good.
Cheers. What a nice problem to have at 30, 31 years old. You're just like,
Yes.
maybe I'll stay here, maybe I won't, maybe I'll
Yeah.
live in this country.
It's nice to have options. It's nice to have a sense of possibility. It's nice to have work that you can carry with you, probably in your backpack.
Mm,
These are things that most people don't have.
mm,
We're very fortunate. Now, a big part of that is we create that, of course, but you know, we have a lot to be grateful for. A
yeah.
lot.
You've actually just given me an idea.
Hmm.
You have. So I had this very brief conversation about
Hmm.
this topic yesterday with someone.
Hmm.
But now we're actually talking about it. I feel as though we could use it as a topic for this.
Hmm.
When you're in your 20s, you have location freedom. You don't have any any responsibilities. We'll say that because
Hmm.
everyone will understand what we mean.
Hmm.
I am going to put forth the idea that it is almost a responsibility for you to go and travel, to live remote, to work remote, and explore the world whilst you have that opportunity before it is inevitably taken away from you.
Hmm. Hmm. Would you like my thoughts?
Of course, let's do it.
Well, I don't like the word responsibility as a start point, because it all. We're back to where we always end up. It all depends on how you want to live your life and who you want to become and what's important to you and all those sorts of things. You and I know more people from our old worlds, of which some we're still in contact with and many we are not, that didn't do that. And they probably shouldn't have, you know, based on the way they're wired and what's important to them and where they find happiness and fulfillment and all those sorts of things. There was just no need to do that. There was no yearning, there was no calling, there was no curiosity, there was no insatiable appetite and sense of wonder. You know, they just don't have it. It's not their fault. Like, we're all different. So for those people, I think what needs to happen happens. But if you're the other way around, which you and I both are, you are curious, you do have wonder, you do have itches to scratch, you do want to chase the upside, you do want to put yourself in radical different situations and just see what happens and trust that you'll make it work and you'll figure it out, then yeah, you have to. Then you have to for sure. Like, you're not going to be content if you don't do that. But I think we're the minority. I think we're in a little bit of a don't know if bubble's the right word, but you know, we're in a niche. You know, what we still do is quite radical for most people. Most people don't
I
understand what,
entirely agree. I
don't
don't.
you?
Now,
Okay.
I will admit there are exceptions. Like, for
Okay.
example, my brother, uh, he's always wanted to be a farmer. Doesn't
Yep.
have a passport. He'll never have a passport. He
Yep.
loves farming. He loves engineering. He
Yep.
does very well for himself. Uh, but he doesn't want to travel. It doesn't interest him. And even so, I live, there's a couple of states away. Even for him to come up here and visit me in the beginning, that was just over the top stressful. They were coming with my niece, who was, I think she was 6 months old at the time. And it was a really stressful experience the first time he stepped out, and he never thought he would do it. But now he's always calling me like, hey, can we come up next week? Hey, can we
Yep.
come up in a couple of weeks? Maybe we'll do this. Now, if you had have asked me 3-4 years ago, would he ever come and visit me? And is he the kind of person that would benefit from getting out of that space, even going a couple of, because there's a very different landscape in Australia. I would have said no, but seeing him
Mm-hmm.
taken out of his space, and seeing how much he loved it as soon as he dealt with that discomfort.
Mm.
So he's the extreme example of someone that's not going to do this. But then
Sure.
the reason I want to challenge that is, if he's the extreme example, there are so many young people in their 20s
Mm-hmm.
that have. I was nervous on going away for my first trip. I was really anxious about it because you don't know what's out there.
Sure.
And if I had have been told that there are some people that just don't travel, some people said that to me, I probably wouldn't have done it, and I probably wouldn't have ended up in this position. So the way I view it is, even if you feel as though you're a person that doesn't want to travel, just go somewhere for a week, 2 weeks, try it out, test it out. If you hate it, well, at least you know that about yourself. But I think it's, bar a few exceptions, nearly a responsibility for you to at least get out there and go to a different place.
I guess responsibility is why I picked you up on that word. That's why I, took. I agree. It would be in most people's best interest, and most people would ultimately be in a better place on the back of traveling. Even if they hated it, it would at least give them clarity that, hey, I'm in the right place doing the right thing, and that clarity could enable them to make certain decisions, and say no to other ones, etc. So I agree, it's in most people's benefit. I don't know they have a responsibility per se. That's where I differ.
You would prefer if the terminology was in most people's best interest.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. That we can agree on. Yeah, we can agree on.
So if you were in your early 20s, no responsibilities, anything like that, and you were living this lifestyle where you can actually work somewhere, what would you say to someone in that position, knowing, or at least suggesting, that it's in their best interest?
Excuse me 1 second.
A little bit rude, but okay. All right, I'll go while you die. So the reason I say this, so I in the Gold Coast at a meetup essentially with Pat's collective group, there was a young guy who you probably know right away, and he'd just gone through a breakup. He was about to sign a lease with a friend to move into a house. He was working completely remote. He had nothing tying him to Australia. He was young, had a bit of money, and it was Laura and myself who were sitting there. And we just said to him, you are doing yourself a massive disservice if you stay where you are. If you sign that lease, by the time that lease ends, you will have given yourself all of these reasons to be tied down, all of these reasons why you can't leave, and you shouldn't let fear get in the way of that. And the fact that you've just become single, that you have all of these opportunities open up to you with regards to what you can do with your life, where you can go, and who you can be with. I honestly think it would be a disservice. And obviously we didn't word it as cleanly as this. It was just, get out there. If you stay here, you're an idiot.
Yep.
He listened, and we put it to the table, because it was a bit of an isolated conversation, and everyone said exactly the same thing. Just get out there, have fun. And now he's like going overseas consistently, doing trips, and just complete glow up in who he is, solely because, now I don't take responsibility for that. What I'm saying is, he did that because he took himself out of that really safe zone that he was in. And I think that one decision entirely changed the trajectory of his life.
Sure. It can and does. I came to Guatemala almost 18 years ago on a surf trip in Costa Rica, Mexico, that turned into me coming to learn Spanish for 2 weeks in Antigua. Nearly 18 years later, I'm sitting here in Antigua. I mean, trips can and do change your life in many different ways. So I agree, it's normally in your best interest. I don't like telling people what to do. So that's where
You don't like telling people what to do, or you don't like being told what to do?
Both. Well, I don't like telling people what to do because I don't like being told what to do. Like, there's congruence there. I really don't like telling people what to do. So I don't mind, you talk about your little conversation at the table there and you use the word fear. Like, did he actually say you were scared? Like, did he say, I want to do it, but I'm scared, or words to that effect?
You could tell there was a lot of apprehension, and there was a lot of fear about what's over there. And I spoke about me before I even came over to Guatemala, before I went overseas at all. There was a lot of fear from my end.
Yes.
And it was like, I get it. You don't know what's waiting for you over there. You don't know what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
But if you stay here, you will simmer in that and most likely regret not going, or you go over, give it a go. If you hate it after 2 weeks, cool. Maybe go somewhere else or come home.
Yeah. 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 I mean, this is a bigger conversation. Like it's like a lot of the language you're using, my interpretation of it, rightly or wrongly, feels a bit convincer-ish. And I reject the convincer approach. So that's probably why I'm pushing back a little bit. I'd be happy to have a conversation with that person and have them realize, if it's even possible, that there's potentially a better play and a better life and a sense of wonder waiting for them ongoing down that way. But I would never tell them. I would never convince them or pitch them. But that's just because I don't like getting that done to me, and I don't like doing things to others that I don't like having done to me. But there's definitely a way that you could ask me questions or pose some scenarios and have me realize that, oh my God, what am I doing about the Sign Lease and the Gold Coast?
But I know you
I
can
need to
switch
get
that
better.
off, and I'll give you context. So you're sitting there, you have another friend who's in a similar position,
Mm-hmm.
who has gone and traveled.
Mm-hmm.
You're sharing the fun stories that you had.
Mm-hmm.
You're sharing all of the apprehensions that you had.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I know you, and I know you like to think that you're full realizer all the time, but you switch that off when you're around certain people, when you're having a laugh, when you're having fun, and
Mm-hmm.
you're just talking to someone.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, there is still some realizer model, as in, what does the alternative look like? But I know you can switch that on when you need to in a fun conversation.
Sure. I think
And
the key
absolutely,
is to
there was
still
an
bring it back
element
to
of
realizer.
convincer.
I think the key is you still bring it back to realizer. You go convincer, and then you drop it back to realizer to ask the question. Like, James, you're being crazy. You really should cancel that lease. You got to go overseas. You'd love it, but hey, it's your decision. You do what you want to do. So you back off, and so it still feels like their decision at the very end. If you didn't throw that last part in, you'd be like, can you back off and stop telling me what to do? But when you throw in that last little bit, it still turns it into a realizer model.
Fair.
So I would do it that way, and that way I could get it across the line. And with realizer model, you can pitch, you can do a bit of convincing, but you always follow it up. It always ends with a question, so they feel like it's their choice. They feel like they have options. They feel like they are the author of this destiny or this destination or journey to the destination, not you. They're not being shoehorned into a corner and forced to say yes to your pitch. That's what I don't like. But
Yeah.
that's the semantics. This has gone off on a tangent. I didn't expect it to go
It
off.
has. So getting back to it. I had a chat to Natalie with a H.
I saw that. Where has she been? Because she used to be. I haven't seen. I saw the episode came up in my feed. I haven't watched it, but she used to be really prolific, and I feel like I haven't seen
So her accounts got hacked, and
What happened?
she couldn't get back. So she was in Tokyo when I spoke to her. Then she was in, I think, Kuala Lumpur, and now she's in Singapore. So she's the perfect example of, she grabbed this and ran with it, and she's gone all over, met remote salespeople from all over the world. You used to see a lot of pictures of her everywhere. And she talked a lot about the nervousness that you have of actually stepping out, how daunting it can be, and everyone's expectations of you. But I think if you have the opportunity to go out, to go and explore, the probability of you being worse off by doing that is, in my opinion, a lot lower than the probability of you being worse off by not doing it.
Sure. And look, if you're watching this show and you're doing remote sales work, you're probably of the sort of mindset. You probably already have done it for starters, but if you haven't, it's probably on your cards, or it's at least within your set of awareness, and you may be considering it in the future. So I think we're probably preaching the converted on this show. But if we go into our real lives, if you go to your jiu-jitsu gym in the Sunshine Coast, or maybe that's not a good example, and some other aspects of life on the sunny coast. You mentioned your brother earlier. We are going to deal with people that it's just not on their radar, or the only time they've been overseas, if they're Australian, is like Fiji or Bali or New Zealand, which is fine. They're all good trips, but there's no yearning to go, hike up the Inca Trail in Peru or something like that, which is also fine. It's not for everybody. Interesting. But yeah, no, as someone that has lived overseas from Australia for about 20 years of my life, obviously I'm an advocate for it.
Yeah. You don't even have to go with the intention of finding a place to live permanently.
No.
I got a one-way ticket, and I spent a good amount of time seeing different parts of the world, but the intention was always to come home. But by actually doing that, it gave me a lot more comfort to come back and be untethered to the places that I was previously connected to, in that, well, I mean, this place is okay, but it's not great. I'd like to go to a place that gives me that sense of wonder and excitement and feel like I'm on a holiday every day.
I think very few people, there'd be some, but very few people would leave home from the Western world, be looking for an alternative home. Some do, but very few do. I lived in London for 2 years. I left Australia knowing I was going to live there, but I was never going to be permanent. It was a, it was a period of my life I was going to
London is
embark
pretty
on.
much cloudier Melbourne, so
Mm, that's another conversation. I came to Guatemala, on a surf trip, thinking I'd be gone for 6 weeks. I ended up staying 6 months initially. Things can happen. That's extreme, what happened to me. But yeah, your world gets bigger. Your appreciation of the world gets bigger. Your reference points get bigger. You become so much more layered and developed and agile as a person. You have such greater clarity on what matters, what's important to you, what you like, what you don't like, what you put up with, what you won't put up with, what options are there, what options are not there. Like the picture gets so much bigger and clearer in all those spaces. And to me, that can only be a good thing. Plus, your network gets international. You might learn some languages. You might form some new friendships. Like, these are all positive things. How could you not want a piece of that? If you're curious, have a sense of wonder, have a sense of openness to other ways and other types of people and ways of interacting, like, you're going to go traveling. To those people, we don't have to have this conversation.
If you're North American, Canadian based, it's so easy for you to access that world. To get
The
from
world,
here, it's 24 hours.
America,
It's a big trip, yeah.
but it's all
You
relative.
have that at your fingertips.
Yes, you're totally right. Latin America, for those, is the case. Obviously, if you're in the UK, obviously Europe, mainland Europe. If you're in Australia, I mean, Fiji, New Zealand, Bali, Singapore, Thailand, they're not that far away. Like, we've all got our equivalents, and they're all interesting places.
Mm.
The Travel Show.
Yeah. What would you say to someone, though, in that position?
What
that was
position?
thinking about
Who or what?
young, location freedom?
I would start with identity-based questions. What sort of life do you want to live? Who do you want to become? What sort of experiences do you want to have? We're 5 to 10 years in the future. What, in an ideal world, 10 out of 10 scenario, what have you done? What haven't you done? What have you seen? What haven't you seen? Who have you met? Who haven't you met? I'd want to get clarity and all that sort of stuff. What itches can you feel internally that you haven't scratched yet? What would you not be content with if you don't do it in the next 5, 10 years? I'd ask all those sorts of questions as a start point. And then on the back of that, once we get clarity from all that, it should be obvious if travel is part of the solution or is not. And if it is, it'll be very easy for them to realize that's the case. And then once they realize it's the case, if they do, then it's a case of, well, what happens next? Is this trip going to happen? Is it not going to happen? You clear where you want to go, when you want to go? We have that conversation. And then eventually, if it all goes to plan, they go, you know what, Michael? I'm going to move to Europe in 2 months' time. I'm going to start with Italy, then go to Spain, and I'm going to work from there. It's going to be the best summer ever. And they decided all that. I didn't convince them of anything. Now, I certainly led them there, but, they came to all those conclusions. I'd feel good about that. Plus, it's fun to do because it's like putting a puzzle together.
I'd be more deliberate.
Yeah, well, you and I communicate.
If you had have asked 20, what was I, 5-year-old me, those questions, I would have been bogged down in a cloud of thought, thinking about those questions for 6 to 12 months.
But I could lead and influence those questions.
Yeah, but you're not going to be there all the time.
True, but we were talking about playing a role play type scenario. We can role play it if you want.
If you were to share the details on here. So the advice I would give. So my first solo trip was Japan, which is 10-hour flight, really safe place. Apparently very accommodating for Westerners. You'll say everything's relatively easy. Was
that just before you came over here? That was your first trip overseas?
No, that was my first solo.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Yeah. And so that was just, I wanted to see it. It seemed like a good place to start. It was a pretty easy step. And I still remember that first morning, getting up, realizing that I'd figured out the train system, got to where I was staying, figured out the train system, which was for an Australian country kid, that was a big deal. And I just remember that feeling of empowerment, of like, whoa, I can do anything. So if I were to have a conversation, or at least anyone watching this, don't get stuck down in thought.
No.
Find a place that's relatively close, as in within a 10-hour flight, and is friendly to basically tourists,
Mm.
relatively easy to navigate. You don't have to go to a completely different culture right away, but
Mm.
just dip your toe in, get a couple of weeks, take your work stuff over with you, make sure you get an Airbnb with a good internet connection if you'll be working. If you're not working, stay in hostels 100%,
Mm.
but just get 2 weeks in a place
Sure.
that's not going to be a massive reach. And I think when you get there, you'll realize pretty quickly, oof, this is going to be fun, or this is not for me.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, sure. And just because it's not for you today doesn't mean it's always not for you as well. Things can change. Things, could be the place. Could, there's many factors in play. You don't have to put a line through it altogether. Although you just might not be a person who travels. Some of the best feelings I've ever had in my life have come from travel, and it wasn't like I saw the Eiffel Tower and was moved. It wasn't anything like that. It was more the sense, the deepest feeling I've ever had of having untapped potential and anything is possible. Just this internal glow almost has been 2 or 3 times I've experienced during travel. First time was when I went on finishing university. I went to London when I was like 23 and lived there for 2 years, and that was great. But the really exciting part was when we went to Spain for the first summer. And when we arrived in Spain, I had cash. I was young, backpacker, first time in continental Europe. Spain in summer is always amazing. I just remember having this sense of anything is possible, uh, and I didn't get that feeling again until just before I came to Guatemala. I was working for the gym marketing company, and that kind of ran its course, and I wasn't in a great place with the owners. That's another story for another time. And I was surfing in Costa Rica in Santa Teresa, which is an amazing place, beach, super unbelievable tropical beach vibe. And I had cash in the bank, and I was still not 30, and I told them that I was going to resign. It was contract work, and I told them I wasn't coming back. And that's how my 6 week trip to Costa Rica turned into 6 months in Guatemala. And at the moment when I made that decision, which I've been wrestling with, because there was security in staying there, but I didn't want to, I chased the upside rather than doing the safe thing. I thought, I'm already in Latin America. I got cash in the bank. I'm not married. I don't have a girlfriend. I've got no debt. Like, this might not ever happen again. The moment when I made that decision and cut that cord, I had the richest feeling of just times 10 the Spain one, because I had money this time and perspective, which I didn't have at 22, 23. And it was just such a good feeling. And I've never had those two feelings outside of traveling. I've only had them in those two moments, and it was unreal. When I went to Bali 3 months ago for the mastermind I went to for that, I had a version, not as strong, but I had a version of that feeling again as well. It's the first time I traveled without my family, um, and since having a family, and Bali's amazing, and it was a great event. I had a small version of that feeling, but it wasn't the same. But I've never tapped into that feeling anywhere else. So for me, just to get that feeling is worth every penny in traveling. Have you had that feeling, James?
I've had a couple. So the first one for me was sitting on that train in Tokyo. At early morning, I got up, I figured out where to go, what to do. And I just remember, because I'd left a job, and it was just making me miserable. I'd had enough. And I knew that this was the tester, but sitting in that train in that moment, there was just this feeling of absolute freedom and opportunity and competence in myself. And that was the exact moment I knew
Mm-hmm.
this is not going to be a short trip.
Yeah.
I'm not going back to get another job.
Yep.
Not for a good while at least. And that feeling there, if you could bottle that up,
Yep.
people would pay
Yeah.
millions,
Yeah. It's
millions to feel that. The other time, funnily enough, was actually in Spain. And so I would have been maybe 24,
mm-hmm.
and I went over with a friend of mine, and we started in Barcelona, and we got up early because the time zone was really weird, and we went to these gardens, and it was about 9 o'clock in the morning, and my friend said to me, he goes, "Do you want a beer?" And I said, "It's 9 o'clock," and he
Mm-hmm.
goes, "We're in Europe on holidays. That's
Mm-hmm.
normal."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then there was that feeling, that little glass break of, whoa, we can do
Mm-hmm.
whatever we want. And
Mm-hmm.
that little shift of, haha, and you
Mm-hmm.
felt like you were being a bit cheeky.
Mm.
but also you weren't at the same time. There was just
Yeah.
that freedom feeling.
Yeah. Well, let's bring it full circle. So if we just described that super intense feeling that we had. If you were to distill down what that feeling represented, it represented freedom, like you said, sense of possibility, sense of opportunity, limitless, restriction free, restrictionless, if that's even a word. Abundance, anything's possible, I can do anything. I'm still chasing all those feelings in the work we do right now. That was just the most extreme manifestation of that feeling. Like if I think of every word I just used to describe that feeling then, they are still all the words that I would use to describe why we do what we do right now. From a selfish point of view, in terms of what I get out of it. You know, I like this work because there's an amazing sense of possibility and opportunity. It feels limitless. It is borderless. It enables me to live an abundant life. It means I don't have a gatekeeper. So if I want to have a beer at 9 o'clock, I don't drink beer, by the way, and I certainly don't drink at 9 o'clock, but I can. I just do it in a different way. I went out for lunch for 2 hours today and had a coffee. I didn't have to ask for anyone's permission. So I'm still chasing the same feelings. It just manifests itself in a different way. And I don't get that extreme burning feeling, good burning, that we've had 2 or 3 times in our lives. So I don't know whether that was like a lead indicator, like this is what you should be chasing more of. I don't know, but that's a way I'd bring it full circle to say that
So
that ultimate feeling I got is still the thing I'm chasing in the work we do. And this work we do enables us to get our version of that.
you saying that reminded me, even yesterday, I had one of those moments. So hopped up in the morning. Obviously, I get up early, had a call, had a podcast, had a little bit of work to do. And then I got in the car and I drove up to Noosa, which is not too far. And
It's
this
about
is
30 minutes.
yeah, about that. So it was about a 10-minute, it was about just after 10 a.m. And I hopped in the car and I'm driving up. And the reason I was going up, sole reason, was there's a jiu-jitsu brand. They have a store there. Some of the black belts that run that come into our gym. And I was driving up just to try out some different jiu-jitsu gear, made sure it fitted, and buy some of that, bring it back. And I just remember being on the driving past beautiful tropical area here, and I'm driving and just seeing all of these beautiful houses and places and palm trees, and then you see the ocean and just beach and just everything was perfect. And I just remember driving thinking, imagine if I had a 9 to 5 and I had someone that mandated that I couldn't do this. Now, ultimately, you can do those sort of things in a 9 to 5 with the right terms, but what I'm meaning is I had that level of freedom of I can do what I want when I want, and even that kind of carried into the afternoon, maybe at 1, 2 o'clock after I was home. I was just working out in the gym here. And I was just thinking, I remember when I was in Bendigo and there was a guy and he got in trouble because he went to the gym at lunchtime with the company that I worked with, and he took an extra 10 minutes every day to just shower and suit up and everything like that. I said, that freedom feeling twice in one day you get.
Yeah.
So you're making that connection, that feeling of abundance and possibility.
Yeah. 100%. That is now why I do this work. I came into this industry through necessity during COVID. We've told that story before. I'm not going back there. But I stay in it now and have double, quadrupled down in it because I can't see a better pathway based with my skill set and the limitations in place with my physical location and what I'm good at and what I like, blah, blah, blah. I can't see a better way to get all those things, ethically, cleanly, something that ticks all the boxes. So I guess it's just turned into a gratitude podcast.
It has.
Where just like in those moments traveling, I was where I needed to be at that moment in time. My body told me that. Like, couldn't have got a clearer signal than that feeling I had. I couldn't be clearer that this is where I want to be and this is what I want to be doing as well. What about you? Are you still clear that this is where you want to be, or how are you seeing it?
100%, absolutely. And I'll add into that two things. One, I said this on a previous podcast when I was in Guatemala hiking that volcano, and there was that guy that was talking about how he just had an open-ended trip. He just didn't go home. And then that was another moment of, whoa, I've
Yep.
been playing this way
Yeah.
too small. And he did all of the things that I was nervous to do, like going and doing Muay Thai and that sort of stuff that I found a little bit nerve-wracking. There was a second thing. So I did mention this on another podcast this week, but I'm reading a book at the moment. I actually just finished it this morning. It's called The Psychology of Money. and it talks about how we connect with money, the impact it actually makes. And it said the only thing that is proven to make someone happier to do with money is the ability to be able to do what you want, when you want, with who you want.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody gets caught in this keeping up with the Joneses.
Mm-hmm.
I need the better car, I need the better house, which takes away from their ability to do the only thing that actually makes them happy.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas we're able to do what we want, when we want, with who we want, and actually work on things that we get up excited to do. And I think a lot of people try and rush to retirement so they don't have to do the work element. They can just do the rest. Whereas they miss that that's a massive part of your life. We actually get to work on things that we enjoy doing.
Sure. We enjoy the journey. Like for those guys that I had a friend whose dad retired like 10 years ago, and 15 years ago, when he was 5 years before his retirement, he could tell you how many days he had left, and I'm not exaggerating. Like that, yeah. And I remember just intuitively that felt wrong. For me, it felt wrong. I didn't project that onto him, I didn't tell him that, but intuitively for me, that felt wrong. Like to live a life where you're literally counting down the days till you retire. It just felt wrong. It doesn't have to be that way. You can do work that gives you a version of that feeling that we talked about that we had during travels. Not as extreme as that usually, but you get a version of that. You can enjoy the ride. In fact, you can love the ride and not want it to stop. I think you and I are doing our version of that at the moment. We've certainly done the alternative, but we learnt our lessons, and we learnt and got clear on what works for us and what serves us and who we want to be and how we want to live our lives. And we're doing our best to do our version of that right now.
If we tie a bow on this,
Mm.
you raised a really good point. That those insights, those feelings that we got by traveling, where we weren't able to access it anywhere else, ultimately gave us a look through the window of the kind of life that we could create and the kind of opportunity that lie in front of us. And then we had something that we could grab onto or remember or understand that we could actually pursue.
Yep. 100%. I actually didn't make that link until this call. That was a real-time link that I made when I shared that thought about 5-10 minutes ago, because I was thinking, if I were to describe the feelings I had, what words would I use? And then I'm like, they're the exact same words I use to describe what we do now. I didn't even realize it was a link. So I've taught myself something on this call. It's good.
I hadn't connected it either. That was good.
Yeah.
That was good.
Cool. That was certainly unscripted. I didn't know we were going to talk about travel today. I hope the viewers got value from that, because that was a bit different to what we normally do.
Yeah. Well, this was a lot of fun. This is a good one. Didn't go where we expected, and that kind of came to me at the start of the call based on recent conversations. But
what was the catalyst for that? What conversation or moment did you have that led to that being what we talked about today?
I mentioned, so what was it? I spoke to someone earlier in the week about speaking to this young guy and everything that he's done on the back of getting out of his little bubble, getting out of the small world that we seem to encase ourselves in. And I figured you would be a good person to talk to about just the power of getting out there, the power of putting yourself in situations where you're not used to the rules of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. That's where the growth happens. I mean, by definition, growth is going into spaces that you aren't currently. So by definition, it's growth. Yeah. Cool. The world's far too small to stay in your hometown for your whole life.
The world is far too small.
If you're white the way we are, that's the caveat. Because there are people that are not, and they're happy there, and that's fine. But they won't be watching the show. I can tell you that much.
Yeah.
Cool. The dog's barking, so that might be the end time.
That's our cue. This was a fun one.
Yes, it was.
And I'll see you next week.
See you next week.